Okay, so it is time for another review. For those of you who have not seen my reviews before, I split my reviews into two sections, spoiler-free and spoiler. In my spoiler-free section, I give you 3 pros and 3 cons about the book in a spoiler-free way to help you determine if this is the right book for you. Then we move on into the spoiler section, where I get to rant or rave in a spoilery way till my heart is content. So let's get right on into the review. Today we are reviewing History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. This book is a YA contemporary standalone that I gave 5 stars to, and it is also dual perspective. So what I mean by that is we follow 2 different types of perspectives, and in this particular case, we follow the perspectives of then and now. Elaborating on that a little bit further, this book deals with moments that occurred in history, so that occurred prior to the book being written, and also moments that are occurring currently as the book goes along. So every chapter alternates. So every first chapter we deal with now, and every second chapter we deal with history. So yeah, I believe this is a very important book to read for 3 different reasons that I will capitalize on in the pros section of my spoiler-free as well as my spoiler review. But to give you a very quick idea of those 3 reasons, the first is that this book is an LGBTIQ+ book if you would like to have more diversity in your reading, and include some LGBTIQ+ books within your reading repertoire. I definitely recommend this book because Adam Silvera is just really amazing at writing real, raw stuff. The second reason why I recommend it and why I think it's really important is because this book deals with I think it's called a mental health issue known as OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and Adam Silvera again writes this stuff in a very real and very raw way. The third reason I think this book is very important is because it deals with grief and loss incredibly well. Whether it is the grief and loss over a breakup or the grief and loss of a death of a loved one, be it someone you were in a romantic relationship with, or someone who is a family member, or that you were friends with. Adam Silvera does grief and loss incredibly well, and it's safe to say I'm a really big fan of grief and loss contemporaries. Hello, Bridget Camera. And this one was done incredibly well. So we'll start with my spoiler-free section, and I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about the premise of this book. So this book follows 4 characters. We start off in the past with a friendship of 3 people: Griffin, Theo, and Wade. We are then also introduced to Jackson. Without giving away too much of a spoiler, because this does occur within the first chapter or the first couple of chapters, we start off following the friendship of Griffin, Theo, and Wade, 3 fast friends, 2 of which end up forming a relationship, Griffin and Theo. We also learn within the first couple of chapters that Griffin and Theo's relationship ends at some point. We don't know why until later on in the book, but we know that it does end, and that Theo ends up traveling interstate, and while he is there, he ends up dating another guy whose name is Jackson. It is while Theo is dating Jackson that Theo dies. Now again, we don't know how Theo dies at the beginning. It takes a while to get there, but it is very clear to see that Jackson, as well as Griffin, still very much love Theo, and that this is going to be a struggle for both of them to get through. This book is written so very well. Let's move on to the spoiler-free section where I give you 3 pros and 3 cons, starting off with the cons. Now, as per usual with me, when it comes to trying to find a con for a book that I've given 5 stars to, it is like pulling teeth. I honestly find it really hard. I struggle to find cons with books that I absolutely love, but I found one particular con that I am going to alert you guys to, and that is the con of using a singular term rather than using the term in a pluralized way. We have separate occasions where the sentence "he looked me in the eye" or "I looked him in the eye" that come up, and this is just, it's really nitpicky of me, but I have to be nitpicky to come up with some kind of a con. This, to me, is a con, and the reason for that is because we are dealing with human characters here. I don't think that's a spoiler. I mean, we learned this in the first chapter. They're human. And so to say, he looked me in the eye, or I looked him in the eye, and use the singular terminology makes me feel like you are talking about a cyclops because you're referring to one eye. I mean, is that how we are as humans? Do we kind of just look into this one. Just this one over there. This one doesn't matter. I mean, no, we don't. So, I would have preferred for Adam Silvera to use the pluralized version to say, I looked him in his eyes, or he looked me in my eyes. The pluralization, because we have two, not one. My second con with this book is just more of a personal con, again, that you may not relate to. And that is a quote from this book, which is, some know a lot about a little and some know a little about a lot. The reason why this gets to me is because, as I said, in this book we are following we're following two characters, but the main perspective is from one character. We're following this character who has lost his ex, who has died, and an ex of mine who I had a lot of love for at that time is the only person to ever say that quote to me. He more phrased it as, it's better to know a little about a lot rather than a lot about a little. But still, this quote is very similar, and it just triggered me a little, so I'm sorry to get all personal on you and give you a con that's just of my own little personal experience of this book. But again, I had to really nitpick at the cons here because they are very few and far between. So few and far between that I in fact have no more cons. You only get 2 cons with this book because the rest of this book is just absolutely amazing that I don't even think I can limit myself to 3 pros. I think I'm going to have to give you 4. So my first spoiler-free pro for this book is that this book explores grief and loss in a really accurate way. There are things that I said in my Goodreads review that are a very minor spoiler, so I don't want to say it here just in case you think it's too much of a spoiler. I'll just stick with that. It's very raw, the way that Adam Silvera explores this topic of grief and loss, and it is also very realistic. There were moments when I was reading this book where I thought, something's going to happen to make it seem a little more happy, joy, I guess, and not maintain the rawness and the realness of exploring this topic, but that never happened, and I really appreciated how raw it felt. My second spoiler-free pro for this book is that it explores another topic really well, and that is the topic of OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Our protagonist has this, and has a very, very severe case of it. 2 examples that I can give you is that he always needs to walk on the left side of anyone who is near him. Whether it's walking or sitting or anything like that, no one's allowed to be on his left, he always has to be on the left. Another example of this is when it comes to counting, everything has to be even for him. So, for example, if he coughs 3 times, he's hoping he's going to cough a 4th time just so that it is an even cough. If someone is ringing him and the phone rings 3 times, he's again going to wait for that 4th ring before he picks up the phone so that it is even. Adam Silvera not only has a very compelling character that just so happens to have OCD, but he explores this topic so well. I happen to know a few different people who have OCD. I don't have it myself, but all I could do really with them was just sympathize with what they were going through, because not having it myself, I don't fully understand what it is that they are dealing with. But Adam Silvera really takes the time to put you inside of the headspace of someone who is going through OCD. And I really appreciated that. It really helped me to get a much better understanding of what anyone who suffers from OCD is going through. It was just really well done. Again, another reason why you should read this book. My third pro is show versus tell. Adam Silvera does a really good job at showing you what is happening rather than telling you what is going on. pretty much for the entire book, I can very vividly see in my mind what is playing out. There is a scene that comes up that I'm not going to spoil for you. I'm just going to say that it revolves around the fictional character of Edward Scissorhands. If you've read the book, you know what I'm referring to. And this was just done really, really well. I'll just say Edward Scissorhands, seeing the image of it provokes something for our main character. And the way that this is written and explored is done so well. I really appreciate Adam Silvera showing as opposed to telling. My fourth and final pro for this book is that it provokes emotion in a really beautiful way. There are authors out there who seem to be forcing its readers to feel some kind of way about different characters. If a character is a villain, the author will go right out of their way to make sure you hate this villain. And if they are a really good character, the author will go out of their way to make sure that you love this character and really think that they are amazing. Adam Silvera doesn't do that. But Adam Silvera writes in a way where you just do. You feel so bad for these characters that are going through this grief and loss, and he just does it in such a beautiful way. Before I get on to my spoiler section, because I know that not everyone is going to watch that, especially if they have not picked up this book, I do want to say that I recommend this book for anyone who wants to read an LGBTIQ+ book, because, you know, let's diversify our reading and add diversity to our repertoire when it comes to LGBTIQ+. This one hits the nail on the head. But also to anyone who has suffered any sort of grief and loss, again, whether it is the loss of a partner, whether you've broken up with them, or the death of someone that you held very dear. Adam Silvera, I promise you, explores this stuff in a very realistic, very raw way that will help you to get through that. But also, even if you haven't experienced any type of a loss, and you want to read a contemporary book that deals with really tough topics, this is the book for you. It deals with grief and loss in a very raw way, and I think that you will enjoy this if you're looking for an emotional read or if you're looking for a book that deals with hard-hitting topics, because it does it really well. Alright, that's where I'm going to leave it for my spoiler-free section. When we return, we'll be coming back with the spoiler version of History Is All You Left Me. If you're not joining me for that, I completely understand. If you do end up picking up this book thanks to my recommendation, let me know in the comments below and let me know what you thought. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday and Sunday, and I'll see you again soon. But for those of you who are joining me for the spoiler version, let's go over there right now. Okay, so this is the spoiler section of History Is All You Left Me. So if you're watching this and you haven't read this book, I've warned you, there will be spoilers. Okay, so I love this book. I think it is, as I've already alluded to, I think it's so very well written, and the content in this book is so very real and extremely raw. While Nicola Yoon here says, "It will make you cry, think and then cry some more," this book did not make me cry per se, but I think that's more because I was reading this book with a very critical eye. This is my very first Adam Silvera contemporary. I very recently read Adam Silvera's fantasy book, Infinity Sun, and I did not like that book, but a lot of people say his contemporaries are better. I went into this book with a critical eye. I went into this book wanting to give you as honest a review as I could. Because of that, I started this book, went all the way through the book, and came out the other side with this critical eye, objective perspective of the book. I think had I gone into this book not being critically minded, mindful of all the critical notes that I wanted to take, I probably would have cried. In saying that, even though I went in very critically minded, this book still does target the heartstrings, especially for me, because of the rawness and the realness that Adam Silvera explores the loss of Theo. I think it was an amazing choice to choose to follow Griffin I think there are many reasons why Adam Silvera could have chosen to follow Jackson instead, but Griffin is just such a complex character that it works on so many levels. It works on the grief and loss level because despite the fact that Griffin is the one that, well, I wouldn't say he broke up with Theo, even though he did. Griffin is the one that let Theo go. He let Theo be free before he travels interstate. But yet he still has a lot of love for Theo. And we even see in one of the chapters when Theo comes back to visit him and Wade, how Griffin's talking to Theo and saying, let's talk real for 10 minutes. I loved that whole moment. I want to have that. This book inspired me to have those moments with my friends where I say to them, right, we're going to put the timer on for 10 minutes and we're just going to talk real. Not that I don't have real moments with my friends, but I just thought it was a really good idea to go from all, let's put up a wall and just be civil around each other to, you know what? We're going to put a time frame on this, but for 10 minutes, we're just going to be completely real with each other and just say what we think and how we feel. And then when the time's up, the wall goes back up. But that scene was just so really well done. And you can see that Griffin definitely wants Theo back and that Theo has pretty much implied he will get him back. So to lose Theo, but not only to lose him, but to lose him while he is with another guy, I thought it was just a great decision to make Griffin the one that we are following. Also, the fact that he has OCD and that we are dealing with that on top of everything else. The fact that we continually see him asking people to move towards his right and that we are continually seeing how he's dealing with the number thing when it comes to OCD as well. It complicates the issue, but it complicates the issue in such a really good way. So I really did appreciate that. I'll admit, by the time I got about a third of the way through the book, I predicted that Griffin and Jackson were going to do something. I didn't know what, I predicted they were going to have a relationship because you can see throughout the first third of the book just how much closer they are getting. They are uniting through a common theme or thing, and in this case being Theo, and it really allowed them to put aside the perceivable threat that both characters had because Griffin is upset with Jackson for having Theo, and Jackson is really nervous that Theo's going to leave him and go back to Griffin. Now that Theo's out of the picture, as wrong as this sounds to say, now that Theo is out of the picture, it allows that wall between both of them to come crumbling down and they can at least be civil towards one another. And then when they're going through the grieving process, no one else can understand what they are going through other than them, because while a lot of people, which is very evident to see throughout the book, a lot of people love Theo, no one loves Theo quite like Griffin and Jackson. So they can both relate to each other from that angle. I did not expect how will I term this for a booktube channel? A one-night stand. I did not expect that. And then after it was over, both characters being filled with a ton of regret over what they've done. I do understand the reasoning behind it. Reading this book, while I was being very critical, at the same time trying to see if this book suits the brief, I was considering how I was feeling when I went through moments of loss with exes that I've had or, people who have passed away. And especially when it came to exes that I've had to mourn the loss of. When we have that scene between Griffin and Jackson does the whole kiss thing with him. This is an Eskimo kiss. This is a zombie kiss. This is the other two that I don't remember right now, but those 4 kisses. And that is something that that Griffin taught Theo, and that Theo then passed on to Jackson. I can absolutely appreciate why Griffin was seeing red at that time and then just wanted to hurt Theo so badly that he had the one night stand with Jackson. I do get that. I wasn't thinking it was going to go there though. I honestly thought they were going to have a relationship and that they were both just going to have a moment where they kind of, I don't know, look upwards or whatever in a way that they're trying to talk to Theo and say, we hope that you bless our lovely little union that we're having here because you loved both of us and now we can both be together. And I don't know, part of me thought that would be beautiful, but on the other hand, the fact that that didn't happen, and the fact that he felt remorse, and the fact that this book continued to remain as real and raw as it does, I appreciate it even more. I would have loved it if Griffin and Jackson lived happily ever after, but the fact that they don't makes the book even better. So I do appreciate that I didn't know where things were going. I knew that the intimacy between Jackson and Griffin was growing, but I didn't know it was going to result in what it did. Then we move back to Wade and how Wade comes out to Griffin, and this was really unexpected because Wade never showed any sign, at least because we're following the perspective of Griffin. I have to say that Wade never seemed to show any sign to Griffin that he was gay or bi. I don't remember which one he is, but anyway. And then that moment when Wade tells Jackson, it's a really, really beautiful moment. So they end up getting together, and I love how... Did I say Jackson? I meant Wade. I love how Wade and Griffin get together, and I also love how everything just connects. How when Wade is referring to the Cedric Diggory charm that he got for Griffin because he understood Griffin, and in that moment, like, Adam Silvera, you can tell that he not only keeps things raw and real, but he is a very intentional writer. We learned very early on that Wade gave Griffin the Cedric Diggory figurine keychain thing, and how Griffin is saying in his little thought monologue, that Theo's present wasn't his best present. His best present was from Wade because he loves Cedric Diggory. But despite that, he's still going out with Theo. So to have that connection at the end of the book where Wade says, yeah, I mean, I've always loved you, but out of respect for you and Theo, I never acted upon it. But I always listened to what you were saying, and I always wanted to be there for you, and that's why I knew that you love Cedric more than... Sorry, I've read the book, I should know. Cedric more than Ron. That's why I got it for you. I just felt that was really beautiful. Then the fact that they ended up getting together right at the end, right before New Year's, I did love. However, this was the point that I was alluding to as far as Adam Silvera keeping grief and loss real, not only raw, but extremely realistic. When Wade and Griffin are talking moments before New Year's, this talk had me a little on tender hooks because I thought that Adam Silvera was going to go from raw and realistic with grief and loss to nice little happy fairy tale ending where all of these thoughts and feelings can just be pushed aside and everyone lived happily ever after. But this is not a fairy tale, and I really appreciate that Adam Silvera didn't just cut everything off at the knees. I love that he continued to keep it raw and real. And had Griffin actually say to Wade, I can't promise that I'm going to get over this overnight. I can't promise that my love for Theo is just going to instantly leave me. It is still going to be there, but I can promise to love you, and that's all nice. But I really thought, because of how seemingly desperate Griffin was getting towards the end of wanting to be with Wade, that he was going to say to Wade, I'm not even thinking about Theo anymore, and we should just be happy together, and I promise you he will never come up again. If that had happened, it would have been such a metaphorical slap to the face. So I'm really happy that Adam Silvera just kept things raw and real. I can't promise I'm going to get over Theo right away, but I'm working on it, and I'm seeing a therapist for my OCD and for my grief and loss, and I'm doing the best that I can. I love that. I don't necessarily feel that Griffin needed to have a boyfriend by the end of the book. I think it's nice that he did, and that he has someone who clearly loves him and who clearly wants to be there for him in a way that no one else is. The fact that Wade challenges Griffin and says, I'm going to walk on your left side and we're just going to see how this goes. You can see that he's really pushing Griffin in all the right directions, and I do really appreciate that. I still don't think that Griffin needed a boyfriend by the end of the book. I think he would have still been fine if Wade was his friend and if Jackson was still his friend. But I guess it was good that he was in a relationship with someone who really loved him and would always be there for him. And you can tell that the trust is fair. Like, Wade will never cheat on him. He will never leave him. He has way too much love for him. I would like for another book in this series. I would love to see it continue on and pick up from where we left off and see how their relationship is now, but it is a standalone. In saying that, this book was just... it was amazing. You guys, I got to a stage prior to starting my booktube channel where I stopped reading contemporaries because I love fantasy. And I still do love fantasy. Got a whole Brandon Sanderson shelf. I still do love fantasy, but recently I've started taking to reading some contemporary books that I've absolutely loved. And when it comes to grief and loss, no one really seems to compare to Adam Silvera and Bridget Kemmerer. We have Letters to the Lost over here. This book is also written really well if you want to read about grief and loss, where it is a male-female way of dealing with it. So, straight coupling in Letters to the Lost. History is All You Left Me being the male, the gay coupling, I guess. But there are contemporaries and then there are hard-hitting contemporaries. This is a very hard-hitting contemporary that is written extremely well. I never do this because it sounds really conceited, but I'm also very proud of myself for reading this book, because after reading Adam Silvera's one and only fantasy book, Infinity Sun, I was so extremely disappointed that had I not already purchased this book, this is my own book, I'm so happy that it is. Had I not purchased this book, I probably wouldn't have gone out of my way to buy this because I was so disappointed by Infinity Sun. So I am going to go back over to a spoiler-free section now to end this video, and I'm going to talk about something there. So we'll do that in a moment. But I'm very proud of myself for reading this book for all the reasons that I've already said. Okay, we're going to quickly wrap up with the spoiler-free section. So I'm just going to wrap things up for you guys. So we'll do that in just a moment. So this review was on History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera, a YA LGBTIQ+ contemporary that deals with grief and loss in a very raw and very real way that I gave 5 stars to. I just want to make a comment at the end of this video that I'm so grateful to Goodreads and to specifically a reviewer on Goodreads. Recently, I was reading Infinity Sun, Adam Silvera's very first fantasy book, and it extremely disappointed me. When I got to about 3/4 of the way through, I started looking for reviews because I just wanted to see if it gets better, because if it didn't, I was going to DNF it. That's how disappointed I was. I came across a reviewer who made a very bold statement saying, if you don't like this book, wait till you pick up Adam Silvera's contemporary books because they are so much better. If you love this book, wait till you pick up Adam Silvera's contemporary books because they are so much better. So this one single passionate review was extremely infectious within me, thinking, okay, I don't like his fantasy work, but maybe I'll like his contemporary works. And you guys, I am going to completely agree with this person's review. Adam Silvera's contemporaries are very hard-hitting, they are very raw, they are very real, they definitely do provoke a ton of emotion, and I definitely recommend reading them even if you don't like his fantasy works. I'm not saying don't pick up his fantasy works, you probably will love them, and for some people, you may not want to read this for different reasons. Maybe you don't want to read about OCD, maybe you don't want to read about grief and loss in a raw and real way, maybe you don't want to read an LGBTIQ plus book, but for many reasons, this book is just such a good, real, raw book, and it is just so amazingly well written. I'm definitely going to continue on my reading experience with Adam Silvera's contemporaries. In fact, I wasn't going to show this to you guys, but recently I received What If It's Us by Adam Silvera and Becky Albertelli. So I think this is a contemporary as well. I purchased this book because I wanted to continue on with Adam Silvera's works. So I'm really glad that I did, and I'll hopefully be reading this book soon. But that wraps up our review of Adam Silvera's History Is All You Left Me, a YA contemporary LGBTIQ plus book that I gave 5 stars to. So, what were your thoughts on this book? Have you read it? Did you think it was good? Did you not enjoy it? Let me know in the comments below, and I cannot wait to hear. But that is where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so very much for watching. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you again, and happy reading! Bye guys! Bye!